Wisconsin pro-choice and pro-life advocates are watching a federal Texas court case closely. A ruling is pending from a judge in regards to medication abortion, which is a prescribed pill that can terminate a pregnancy. NBC 15's Marcus Arsvold joins us live in the newsroom to explain how those on both sides of the abortion debate feel about abortion pills. Marcus?
Lee, a Texas conservative organization alleges the Food and Drug Administration didn't follow protocol when testing the safety of pills people can take to have an at-home abortion. I spoke with a pro-choice lawmaker and pro-life organization to see why this case is drawing their attention. Wisconsin State Senator and Democrat Kelda Royce is passionate about reproductive rights.
Or for somebody in a state where abortion is criminalized, it's really important to have medication abortion as an option.
Senator Royce says abortion pills like mifepristone and misoprostol should be legal, especially now that abortions at a healthcare facility are not. She says the Texas court case is the result of extremism, similar to the way Wisconsin women are living under an 1849 law.
The fight isn't really between Republicans and Democrats. It's between normal Republicans in Wisconsin who are voters and the very extreme right-wing politicians in this building that hold power.
She predicts similar court cases could happen in the Badger State.
And that overturning Roe was the beginning of the anti-choice movement's work, not the end. They want to see abortion banned nationwide.
Anti-abortion organization Wisconsin Family Action President Jelaine Appling disagrees.
This is all about the pro-abortion's reaction to the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
She says the Texas court case is caused by the Food and Drug Administration not doing their job.
The drug is administered at home by the woman. It's self-administered. And we don't believe that the FDA has warned women enough, given the drug enough study, and just put it through the processes that would be appropriate for something like this.
Law experts say the Texas ruling could come through at any time. Live in the newsroom, Marcus Arsvold, NBC 15 News.